We are here this afternoon to provide some significant updates to the vehicle-borne improvised explosive device and suicide at the Trump Hotel. We have uncovered additional documents and information we feel it is important to share with you all. I will reiterate again, however, to you that with this new information comes more questions than answers. I will not provide an opinion on what the documents mean, nor will we release information or documents that have not been completely verified by our joint investigators. On the cell phone of our suspect, we discovered a much larger 6-page, what we're describing as a manifesto. This is in addition to the previously released 2 letters and the email that was sent to the mentioned podcast host. On this particular 6-page document, there is material that we still have not been able to work completely through with our federal partners and the Department of Defense, and some of that material may be classified, so we will not be releasing that document yet in its entirety. You will see some excerpts from that document here in just a few moments. New evidence has also emerged that this death was a suicide and that a V-bid or a car bomb was used in the incident. We'll talk a little bit about that. Of particular note, we also have clear evidence in this case now that the suspect used ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, to help plan his attack. I'd also like to note that in these documents you will see that the suspect believed he was being followed all the way from Colorado. And I want to make it clear that our suspect in this case has never had a criminal history, nor was he on the radar of the FBI or the LVMPD prior to this bombing.
We now have video footage that we're able to confirm that the suspect did prepare and stage for his planned attack. You'll see the suspect here in the video. He'll end up pulling out a can of racing fuel from the back of the vehicle, and then he'll start pouring that racing fuel onto the back where there's contents of explosive materials. You'll see that in just a moment here. It's a white can. We did recover that can from the vehicle and did confirm that it was racing fuel. In addition to this video, after you see him pouring it, you're going to see as the vehicle drives away, you'll end up seeing fuel leaking from the vehicle, which is consistent with what you're seeing him pour. So he'll seal the vehicle right here, and then he'll start driving off, and you'll start seeing traces of fuel that's dripping from the back of the vehicle. You'll see other parts here, and you guys can take a closer look after the fact too to try to see the dark spots versus the spots that were dry before. In addition to this video, we also have additional evidence that includes showing that the vehicle was leaking upon his arrival to Trump Towers. So in just a moment here, you'll start seeing right there, you'll see a trail of liquid falling from the back of the vehicle. And you'll see a before and after comparison in just a moment of the valet right before he drives onto the valet area and after, which will show you the fuel leaking from the vehicle. The other thing is there's a video here that we're going to show you that will show that his hands are on the steering wheel as he's driving up to the valet. There was some conversation about whether the vehicle was in self-driving mode. We've already addressed that in terms of the technical data that we collected, but also you can see that his hands are on the steering wheel as he's pulling up. And then finally, we're going to show a video here, and ATF will elaborate on this a little further in their briefing. And that occurs frame by frame. You'll see an initial flash prior to the larger explosion. So we'll pause right there. That's the initial flash that happens right before the large explosion. You're going to see a still in a moment. Right there's the initial flash. And then following that is the large explosion. The other thing that you're seeing circled in red there is we believe fumes from all of the racing fuel that was poured inside the vehicle and on the back. It ignited first, which is consistent with the briefing that you're going to get from the ATF on how the actual explosive materials were ignited. The next area I want to talk about briefly is the physical evidence recovered from the vehicle. There were 3 cart casings, .50 caliber expended cart casings that were recovered. You can see images from the forensics there. What's very important about these cart casings in terms of what happened in that vehicle, 2 of the cart casings had primers that were burned out due to the intense heat. This is consistent with the type of explosion that we believe occurred, and again, ATF will expand a little bit more on that. However, one of the 3 cart casings, as you can see, shows that the primer was punched, which basically means that it was shot through a gun, which is consistent with what we believe happened, that he ended up using the firearm to commit suicide. In addition to that, just want to revisit the firearm damage. There were 2 firearms that were recovered, the AR pistol and the Desert Eagle handgun. On the AR pistol, we found that it was inoperable, so we were limited on the ballistics analysis that could be done. However, we did find that there was a damaged cartridge inside the AR pistol that looks like it was damaged from the intense heat, which would have caused the round to go off, but it was not fired by the gun. Secondly, the Desert Eagle handgun, when we did the forensic analysis on that, we did find that there was 1 unfired cartridge inside of the firearm, which is consistent with the firearm having been discharged and the reload happening, putting another bullet into the chamber. The other area, just very quickly on the explosives, our lab did do some tests and they did confirm the presence of ammonium nitrate and aluminum. Our financial records, his journal entries, a variety of other things confirm that he did purchase what he believed was tannerite, but it was a different form of exploding targets that has has ammonium nitrate and aluminum in it, which is one of the explosive materials that he had. Transition over to the digital forensics. We had briefly mentioned that there was a note in his phone that was titled surveillance log or surveil log, and it was more of a journal of activities. It did point out people he thought were following him at various instances. We will work on trying to get as much of that information out as possible, but just so you can kind of have an idea here, there's kind of a little bit of a summary. So for example, on December 27th, you can see he talks about purchasing the firearms, in particular the Desert Eagle and the AR pistol. On December 28th, the following day, just an excerpt for you, talks about picking up the Cybertruck as a rental and purchasing exploding targets. On December 29th, he talks about purchasing camping gear as well as white gas, which we believe is the fuel. On December 31st, he talks about reaching a decision point, and he talks about committing to the Grand Canyon, that he plans on conducting surveillance at the glass walkway and identifying a launch route. The sheriff had mentioned this earlier. We wanted to be able to provide additional details to you on that topic. Continuing on the digital forensics, well, actually, I will just reference that. When he talks about the Grand Canyon, that was on December 31st. We don't know exactly why he changed his plans from going to the Grand Canyon to potentially launch off of that glass skywalk. And why he chose Trump Towers. We're still looking at that. But ultimately, as we all know with what happened, there was a change in plans, and he showed up here at the Trump Towers on the following day on January 1st. Now moving on to that 6-page manifesto that the sheriff talked about. This document was found as part of the digital forensic analysis of his phone. There's a variance of grievances and a constant evolution of his plans or intents of what he wanted to do. There's mentions of political and social and cultural issues to include criticism of the current administration. He also does write in there that he was super high on weed and drinking, which we are still working to confirm. And then he discusses the Cybertruck being used as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. He also says that he has graphic encounters from his military experience that replay in his head over and over, and that now he feels like he's a shell of a human being with nothing to live for. This is important not only because it points out the suicidal component, but it also talks about the mental health that he was dealing with, mental health issues that he was dealing with. Just continuing on that manifesto, a few other excerpts for now is he discusses the concerns about the withdrawal from Afghanistan and losing his teammates, which again builds upon that potential PTSD that we're referring to. He does transition at some point and talks about being concerned of the media labeling him as a terrorist and that he had no intent on killing anyone else aside from himself. But finally, one of the last points in there, because this constant flow back and forth of different thoughts, he does talk about his intent to make this as public as possible and that he is loaded up on boom and quotations and fireworks for New Year's. Moving on to another part of the digital forensics, the sheriff talked about how the suspect in this case used ChatGPT to plan out his attack. You're going to see a few of the entries that he posted. This is chronological by date, but he basically starts using ChatGPT, which is a generative AI, to be able to get information on how to conduct this particular plot. So ultimately, you'll see that he looks at trying to figure out the amount of explosives needed in order to conduct the explosion he was looking to cause. He also talks about, in the next set of questions, you'll see he's trying to figure out where to buy fireworks and how much of it to buy. He looks at the equivalence of those fireworks and how they compare to TNT and other types of explosive material. On this next set of questions, there's a focus on the velocity of the bullet fired from the firearm and determining whether that would ignite the explosives. This is an important component, as you'll see when the ATF talks about the amount of explosives that he had and how they exploded, and a lot of those actually not detonating. Ultimately, that has to do with the research on ChatGPT, determined that he needed at least 2,000 feet per second velocity on the firearm in order to be able to actually cause a full detonation of all the explosives he had. And then finally, on the last one, he talks about this more about the amount of material he needs, and also interest in how to buy a phone without providing any personal identifying information. And then finally here, just on the last piece on the digital forensics, we talked a little bit about the data recovered from the Tesla. There were 3 devices recovered. Originally, we were talking about the SDMI chip and the thumb drive. Technically, there are 3 components in there that we're able to try to analyze forensically. The SDMI chip only contains mechanical data, does not contain videos. That we did look at, and Tesla is proprietary to Tesla. They are helping us try to recover any kind of technical information about the vehicle at the time of the explosion. The USB drive is where videos are stored. That was damaged. We were able to pull partial videos, which we talked about, and we showed you the video from Kingman, Arizona. And then there's the restraint control model, which is very common to a lot of vehicles, where you have a mechanism in there to be able to record crash data. We did recover that. As of now, we don't have any valuable information from it because it did not trigger a crash. But most importantly, there's been conversation about in-cabin video and why don't we have video that shows exactly what happened inside the vehicle. As described to us from Tesla, the in-cabin video only records when you're in full self-driving mode, and it does not save that data. So it actually is just a live recording that basically happens to alarm the driver if they're falling asleep or something like that while it's in full self-driving mode. We know through the forensic analysis and through the work with Tesla that the vehicle was not in self-driving mode, so this feature would not have been activated, which is why we don't have video footage of the in-cabin activity.
One of the main goals of ATF in this investigation is to provide an assessment of the design, construction, and the effects of this explosive event. Our preliminary assessment includes the following. An explosion did occur with up to 60 plus pounds of pyrotechnic material. This is an explosion and not a detonation. At this time, there has been no purchase records or physical evidence recovered from the scene that indicate any type of remote control, remote detonation, or sophisticated timed initiation system was used. The initial explosion is a fuel-air explosion. It in turn ignites the fireworks and other explosive materials that were inside the Cybertruck. The evidence supports and suggests a large portion of almost 20 gallons of fuel were poured over the fireworks and the explosive materials that were inside the cargo compartments of the Cybertruck. To date, our national response team experts have been able to calculate a minimum net explosive weight of 60.2 pounds of explosive material. This material is a combination of exploding targets, smokeless powder, consumer fireworks, and other aerial shells. This explosion was enhanced by Coleman Fuel, VP Racing Fuel, MSR Super Fuel, and 70 pounds of Eagle Magnum lead shot, essentially bird shot. The estimated 60.2 pounds of explosive weight is a minimum amount of purchase based on purchase records and the residue that remained from the event. That true total could be much higher. In fact, we still have investigative leads as far as the purchase material that once we have those calculations will change. The initiating flame to these explosives could have been from several possible sources and cannot be confirmed or eliminated at this point of this investigation. Due to the near simultaneous fatal gunshot, fatal gunshot, and device initiation, it is possible that the muzzle flash alone was an initiation source to the fuel air explosion. Other possibilities that cannot be ruled out and could include something as simple as the suspect lighting a flame source just prior to pulling the trigger of the semi-automatic pistol. Also, there's remnants and evidence that there was hobby fuse strung basically from the front of the compartment to the rear. That hobby fuse would, the way that we found it, could absolutely be an ignition source to the fuel-air explosion. So, and the third possibility that we're not ruling out, and we have to continue to work with Tesla in the forensic download of the information from the vehicle, is a potential of an electrical short within the vehicle. And that electrical short could result in the ignition of the flammable vapors. This was kind of covered really well before, but just to draw some attention to the video evidence, if you can go to like the very first frame you just had right there. So that initial flash point is consistent with the area of the driver that was found in that vehicle and the self-inflicted gunshot wound. That is consistent from our belief that muzzle flash alone could initiate this fuel-air explosion. And then this view is a little bit forward. That's initially the second frame as we progress through that. That visual just visually characterizes exactly what a fuel-air explosion is as it propagates from the initial ignition and then and eventually moves throughout the vehicle. The flame there on the seam of the door just further verifies that fluid was poured throughout that vehicle and is dripping from that vehicle as he rolls up, and that vapors from that is all starting to ignite. Even though this goes fast as it's played through, in orders of magnitude, this is much slower than a detonation of high explosives. And then as you continue through, it just shows the destruction of that vehicle, and a full thermal event occurs after that. It is important to note that the consumer fireworks are designed specifically to not mass detonate. This limited the explosive effects, resulting in a deflagration versus a detonation of the materials. In other words, the fire that resulted from the fuel-air explosion essentially just lit the fireworks located throughout the Cybertruck, and they functioned as they are designed. And then final point that I want to make a point of, the volume of lead shot, 75 pounds of purchased birdshot, is indicative of an attempt to weaponize the device over and above the explosive and incendiary effects. So we do know, as a matter of fact, that the results of this explosion could be much greater.
So the question is it concerning to us that he was able to use ChatGPT to get an answer on how to build some of what he did? I would answer that question by telling you that we knew that AI was going to change the game at some point or another in really all of our lives. And certainly I think this is the first incidents that I'm aware of on U.S. soil where ChatGPT is utilized to help an individual build a particular device, to learn information all across the country as they're moving forward. And so absolutely it's a concerning moment for us, but it's also goes back to my last point that it's instructive to us, right? It's instructive to us across this great country of ours to share with other law enforcement and other entities about what it is that we know and how it is that we know it, which is exactly why I'm going back to releasing the information. When we know that we're not going to compromise sources and methods of the way information is obtained, we have been leaning forward in releasing every single document that we possibly can, and we will do that as long as it doesn't endanger anybody's lives moving forward. So we'll continue to do that, but yes, 100%, I think the ChatGPT was a game changer for us here. So the question is why does what he sent to the podcaster matter in our investigation and releasing of all of the documents that we're releasing here today? And I think it goes to show his mental status. It goes to show what he was thinking. It goes to show what his intent was or was not. Quite frankly, as you well know, I mentioned this in the first 2 press conferences, we're very well aware of all of the things that are out there on the internet that are being said about what occurred, what didn't occur, and we're working very hard to answer every single question that we have out there. We're trying to figure out why Las Vegas, why the Cybertruck, why the route that he came here. I think we have some pretty good answers, but as I mentioned to you previously, I'm not going to answer anything on hypothetical. I'm only going to give you the facts as I know them. So